Hi. Are you doing a podcast?
Welcome back, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Today I chat with Karly from Healing is a Bitch. So stay tuned. Here we go.
So much for, just answering me, first of all. That I feel like was so nice. I've obviously appreciated, and I find like I always say things don't happen by coincidence. And so somebody that I don't know personally, but I follow them on social media, they shared your post, and I was like, let me dig in because this is intriguing. And I would say like for the last few years, I've been on this spiritual awakening journey and like doing my inner work, but it's all self-taught. It's like when I go through something like mentally, emotionally, and like physically, like I feel different to how I would normally react to things. And so when I came across your page, I was like, this would be a good conversation.
Yes, I am so glad that you asked me. I don't always see my message requests, but I consider it a moment of fate. That was the day that I was like, "Oh, I see a message request. Let me click on it." But for anybody listening, if you message me, unless you get sent to message requests, I answer every single message that I receive. And I'm always welcome to come on and talk to people because I also am a self healer. I have a long journey where I learned all the lessons the hard way, and now I'm putting it together and helping present it to other people so that you don't have to.
That's awesome. And so obviously like I've seen the book that you've written, and it's Healing is a Bitch,
Yes,
right? And
healing is a
so
bitch.
but
Yeah,
I
it's
did do a little bit of like stalking on your profile. That's not the first book you've written. Or it
it's not
is.
the first book.
Okay.
Um, so currently I have four or five anthologies put out. And an anthology is a collection of short stories written by different authors. My friend and I were kind of compiling them all together and publishing them. Since then, I started school, she started work. We love what we do, but your girl's got to make a paycheck.
This is true.
So I have several fictional works out. Most of what's out there is either scary or spicy or a blend of both. So, pick
Love
your
it.
flavor when
Yeah.
you're looking at my previously published works. And I do have a full novel I wrote it a few years ago. It had a little bit of a rough entrance into the world. And so right now it is being edited. I have a fantastic team of editors. They Split Leaf Publishing. They both do a full edit. And so I'm in the process of editing that. It is all of my fictional writing has themes of trauma, chronic illness. I write from experience, and I write so that other people will feel less alone. So I do have a little library of fictional work out there. Healing is a Bitch, an irreverent guide to trauma recovery, is my first nonfiction um, release, and that's going to be a series. This one focuses on trauma. So inside at the beginning, you have information about what trauma is, what a trigger is, what is PTSD, what is CPTSD, and I kind of give the basic level of information about what trauma is, how it may show up in your life, symptoms that you might be experiencing. But since I am not a therapist, there is that disclaimer at the front. I'm not a therapist, I'm not a mental health professional. I wrote this book like it was your sweary best friend sitting down and talking to you. I didn't want it to feel
Love
like you're
that.
reading a textbook. I wanted it to be fun and to reflect
Yeah.
my personality. So there's swears sprinkled in there because that's just how I talk.
Yes. Oh, that's like second nature in this household.
Yes, yes. So like all of that's in there. And then I wanted this to stay accessible to anyone, whether you read tarot or not. I designed it to have different prompts. So there's three phases. After you have the brief the introduction of what trauma is and all of that. And each phase is meant to build on each other to give you prompts to kind of ask yourself those hard questions. I use tarot in my practice to answer this type of things. But for people who don't read tarot, they can be used like journal prompts. You don't have to read cards. But if you do read cards, at the end of the book, there's a few different bonus spreads, so that you can dig a little deeper. But it's basically everything that I wished I had known when I was being traumatized, when all of that was happening and I was trying to figure out what was up from down. It's all
Yeah,
of that information in one place, but in kind of an easy to digest way. So
got
that's
it.
my little passion project there.
I love that. I love that you also say it's like, having a sit down conversation with your best friend, because I think that when people go through certain, traumas and spiritual awakening, I will say mine started, I lost my best friend in 2016,
Hmm.
and I was 23, and I would say like my life just shifted in the sense of like my whole personality changed. Like
Yep.
I didn't want to be surrounding myself with the people that I was friends with. I wasn't doing the same things. I was just not aligning with people, if I would say, like on the same frequency. And
Hmm.
it was such a lonely journey, but a scary journey as well, because it was like my body was going one way and my mind was going another way. So I was still trying to
Yes.
do the old things. And then I would get home and I would say, well, that was a waste of time. Or I feel drained and I feel like, why
Hmm.
did I do that? And then there was days where it's like, you just don't want to get out of bed. And I had no knowledge of a spiritual awakening or like vibrating at different frequencies. And I think this is where I had to start teaching myself. So I'm saying I wish that, I knew somebody like you or had this book
Hmm.
available at that time, because you can't just have this conversation with anybody, especially somebody
Yes.
that's not open-minded. And I think also for somebody that comes from a very religious background, like I have a lot of faith in my religion and I believe in God. It's like, okay, now I feel like I'm contradicting what I was
Hmm.
taught and what is going on. And I think also what I've learned is that you don't just have one spiritual awakening in your life. It's like as you keep, vibrating and going through these steps, it's just it can be a lonely journey. And I think that's because
Yes.
not every person or not everything is meant to be in your life for such a long time. And when people are not on that same frequency, you need to cut ties. And that's where
Yes.
the loneliness comes in. And so there's a lot of, like the inner work. If you don't do that inner work of understanding yourself and wanting to be alone, you struggle. And so when you should be moving on, it's like you fall back into bad habits because I don't want to lose my friends and I don't want to be alone and I don't want to not enjoy the parties that everybody's going to. But on the journey, you actually have to be alone and, learn to love yourself, if I put it that way, because love is like the highest form of frequency. So if you've got to love yourself by yourself, and then as time goes on, because they say like, patience is the virtue, you kind of meet your new people. You meet your new people, your new journey on life. And so just hearing what you're saying, like, this all comes from your trauma and the things that you've went through. Would you be open to speaking about what had happened that escalated to you, like putting, what's it, pen to paper?
Oh, absolutely. That story is a really long one, and I'll condense it, but I'm happy to dive into it. Feel free to ask anything that you want. But I actually wanted to point out a few really beautiful things that you said before we started that, because number one, healing is incredibly lonely. It is so isolating. And one of the things that doesn't get highlighted often enough is something that you said, which is that when you have experienced a trauma, you change. You are not the same person, but then you're still kind of forced to operate like you would in the past. And the more you step into your healing, sometimes those people in your circle will look at you and be like, well, but you're not the same person that you were. And it's like, well, you know what? Fun fact about that. In fact, I am not. I am a very
Exactly.
different person. So I have had that experience so many times, and I am so thankful for my friends because most of them knew I had trauma. I have backstory trauma. I met them already traumatized before my major period of trauma that left me with PTSD. So they knew me with a trauma background, but then when the fresh trauma was happening, I did have people who were like, "Well, you're not responding to me. You're not doing this, you're not doing that." And it's hard to explain to people who have not experienced trauma the effort that it takes just to show up day to day. Kind of like you were saying, the days when you don't want to get out of bed, the days when you have to force yourself to do things. And kind of like you were saying with the vibration, like if you are going through a healing journey, there are people that you may have been close with, you may have had beautiful, fulfilling relationships with before you experience trauma. It's not a personal fault if those people don't stick around for your healed version. Some people are unable to go on that journey or to understand the changes because they have not been in your shoes. But
Yes.
it doesn't mean that anything is wrong with you. And
Hmm.
that's kind of one of the things that because I felt that so many times because I'm like, well, so many people are telling me like I'm not like, well, you respond differently now. Like you don't do X, you don't do Y, you don't do Z anymore. Like, are you mad at me? And I had such a hard time telling people like, no, I want to connect with you. I'm in a really weird
Place.
in between space where
Yeah.
you're like, you're not who you were, you're not who you're going to be. And there's a lot of pain and a lot of feelings that have to be processed on the in betweens. So if you are listening to this and you know someone who has been traumatized and you're on the outside of that and you're kind of like, well, why aren't they responding to me more? Instead of waiting for them to respond, you can reach out to them because a lot of the time those very same people don't want to reach out because they feel like a burden or they feel like they've been stuck on the same thought or the same feeling and that people don't want to hear it again. Like they want to connect with you just as much as you want to connect with them. It's just being willing to meet them where they're at. And I still have days when I am like, that's enough peopling. It's like 9 a.m. and I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't think I have energy for this
Yeah.
today. I'll
No,
just
100%. But also just to
yeah.
piggyback on that, I think that there are some people that are not emotionally and mentally mature to understand that they
Yes.
have issues dealing with how they deal with things.
Yep.
And so if like for you and I who are knowledgeable in it, we know how to deal with it. We know how our minds work and how our bodies work. And so we've kind of broken those generational curses into, okay, this is happening. I need to deal with it. But then there's people that they don't. And
Right.
so that's problematic for people that are also trying to reach out and help because they always get that pushback like I
Mm-hmm.
don't need you, I don't want you. So then it kind of gets portrayed or seen as, okay, well, they just don't want to be friends, they don't want to understand, and I've tried and it is what it is. And sometimes you just have to take the back step. And I think that even if you lose somebody, there's no rule that says this person might not come back into your life in 2 years or 2 months or 2 weeks. And
Yep.
so it's just a patience game and it's an understanding game. But I do think that there's a thin line that treads on, the relationship can be broken because now just because somebody's going through something, there's a fine line between understanding it, but then also
Mm-hmm.
disrespecting the person because you can fix
Yes.
a heartbreak. You can't
Mm-hmm.
fix disrespect. And so
Yes.
I think this is where people don't understand that when you lose somebody and they don't come back, it's because of how you handled or chose to handle that person or yourself. So,
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah. Beautifully said.
Well, you spoke about reading tarot. I read it. I've never, thought of like going to somebody because again, it comes back to, what I was taught as a kid and, there's the religion aspect and this, but I am intrigued by it. I'm
Hmm.
always intrigued by, the different methods that people listen to the universe and listen to themselves. And so I would love to know a little bit more about like when did you get started in that and what led you into getting started and where are you now with it?
Absolutely. I have had a really interesting spiritual journey. So I was raised Mormon. I was born into the church. My mom's mom, like my bloodline goes all the way back to the founder of Mormonism through his brother. So like that is the culture. It's my heritage, it's my DNA, whichever way you want to look at it. Mormonism is in my blood. So with that being said, when I grew up, I had very black and white thinking of the world because I was not given the option to explore. There's no gray area within Mormonism. It is a very high demand black and white religion. There are rules that you will follow. Um, so I had a difficult journey within Mormonism, but I didn't leave the church until I was mid to late 20s. I had two kids at that point, my older two, and I was just miserable. I don't think that miserable is even like a good enough word for it. I would go to church and I would leave drained and my head would be pounding. And I just kept thinking, like, it's not supposed to feel this way.
Like this. Hmm.
Yet they actively preach that when you go to church, you feel so uplifted and it's starting your day, your week out right, being connected to God and all of that. And I left week after week feeling worse than I did before I went in, just completely exhausted. I was a young mother. I got married when I was 19 and I had my first daughter when I was 21. So I'm young, trying to figure everything out. My now ex-husband joined the military, so he was in and out of the picture all of the time. And so I Googled one day. I don't remember exactly what I Googled anymore, but it was something along the lines of, why do I feel worse after going to church? And then I put Mormonism in
Okay.
because I had some level of awareness of other religions. I understood the differing beliefs, but I didn't have any reason to question what I was taught at church because A, they start teaching you from the second you're born.
Born. Yeah.
B, it's my bloodline. So I didn't think that
You
what I
don't
was being
question it. Yeah.
exactly. You're not
Yeah.
taught to question. You're taught to go along with
Follow.
what you're taught, right?
Yeah.
And so when I Googled that, a podcast came up, and that podcast was called Mormon Stories. And I devoured episode after episode because for the first time, I was hearing the actual history of the Mormon church. I was hearing people's experiences who were leaving the church. And I was introduced to a book. I can't remember the title of it now, but the author's name is Grant Palmer. And in that book, he's talking about the Book of Mormon, which Mormons are taught is a sacred text. It's revelation after the Bible. And so they read the Bible and then they have the Book of Mormon and they're considered like a holy trinity, if you will. Pardon, that
Yeah.
was irreverent, but and some of the things that we're taught as Mormons is that if the Book of Mormon is true, none of isn't true, then none of it's true. Like it's taught to that level of this is the word of God.
Yes.
And so I'm reading this book and he is breaking down the history of the church, the the lies, the manipulations that are built into the church, the things that we are taught versus what is actually true.
Happening.
And his conclusion was that the Book of Mormon cannot be true. Factually, it literally cannot be true. There's no actual proof. There's lots of
Mhm.
Mormon apologists who will argue that fact, but scientifically speaking, historically speaking, there you cannot back up the
Yeah.
Book of Mormon, right? But something about the way that he phrased it just kind of set me free. And I was like, okay, so this isn't true. And then I went, well, if this isn't true, then nothing's true because that's what I was taught. And so I kind of entered this phase where I spent a few years really deep diving into the history of Mormonism and trying to understand my experience within Mormonism and why some of the things that happened were so traumatic for me. But then being able to look back and see, okay, well, this is conditioning, this is coercive control, this is all of these different tactics that I was able to understand how I got to where I was at, right? So it was a long time of deep deprogramming, really. Like
Yeah.
decent, like looking at it and figuring out, trying to figure out what I actually believe in.
Yeah.
So around that time, um, I was fully atheist for a while, and then I kind of moved into the agnostic category where I was like, well, maybe like there must be something, but I don't know what that something is. So
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
okay. And I was exploring, I was reading about other religions. I read about Wicca and things like that. But there wasn't really anything that like really resonated or really connected with
Where you
me.
felt connection. Yeah.
Right. So up until then, I have lived in Texas my whole life. So at that point of my life, I just left the church, was starting to kind of like figure out what I believed. And my ex-husband wanted us to move to Florida for a transfer for his work. So we did that. We moved to Florida. And when we moved to Florida, I had some experiences in my new house that I could not explain. I didn't have any frame of reference for because Mormons uh, typically are not super superstitious. We don't really believe in ghosts. There's not like
Yeah.
any of that going on. But in this house, I was experiencing things that I could not logically
Explain.
explain.
Yeah.
And I had met these women who were talking about birth charts and things like that. And I did not know what that was, but I had heard the term, so I had a loose understanding of it. So I kind of mentioned to them some of the things that had been happening in my house. And I had this one night that it just absolutely terrified me. Um, I had It's actually kind of dumb. I never wear shoes, so I'm constantly hurting my feet. Like if so many of my stories start with, well, I did this to my foot, but earlier that day I had like stubbed my toe, and it sounds silly because it's such a small thing. And
Mhm.
then I just went around my day. I went walking around the neighborhood with my friends. We went to the pool with the kids. We were all swimming. We were all playing. When I went to lay down at night, I had so much pain in that one toe. And I was like, this is ridiculous. I need to wear shoes. And I
Yeah.
got up to get some ibuprofen, which was downstairs. But when I opened the door to my bedroom, I just stopped dead in the hallway. Like I could not take another step because I just I just knew to the very core of my being that I was not alone, except I knew I was alone. And I knew that my kids were in the room with me because
Yeah.
my ex-husband worked night shift a lot. And anytime he was on night shift, they would come and
With you.
camp out in my room.
Yeah.
Um, and so I was like doing the thing where I was like, well, my dog would be barking if there was a human. Like what is this
What is
experience?
happening? Mm.
So I had mentioned it to my new friends, and they suggested that I have the psychic come over to my house. Mind you, I've never believed in psychics. I've never had a tarot reading. I never even believed in ghosts. And all of a
Mm.
sudden, I'm in a new state after like completely changing my entire belief system. And I'm like, oh, I don't know, fuck it, why not?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
so I had her come over and she's clearing my house with holy water. She's calling on Archangel Michael. All of this completely unfamiliar to me because Mormons don't do archangels and they don't have holy water. So I'm
Yeah.
just like trailing behind her with like eyes wide, like, I don't know what I'm supposed
What's
to be doing,
happening?
but
Yeah.
okay. I'm taking it all in. And then she asked if I wanted to have a reading, if I wanted her to give me a reading. And I was like, well, I've come this far. Like, why not? Right? Why not see what that's like? And she sat down, and her deck of cards was a past life deck. And at that time, I couldn't have told you if I believed in past lives or reincarnation or anything like that. But she was telling me things about myself that she had no way of knowing.
Knowing.
Things that I had thought and I had felt, but that were such painful thoughts to me. Like, she was very gentle. This wasn't like a bad reading, but like to me, I didn't have anybody to verbalize them to. So the pain for me was realizing that I was essentially alone, that like I didn't have anybody to share these thoughts or these feelings
Yeah.
with. And this stranger is sitting in front of me telling me about the way that I
Everything.
was feeling and the struggles that I was having. And I knew that she couldn't have known it from my new friends because I am a person that takes a while to get to know. I have
Yeah.
guards up, I
Private
don't,
life. Hmm.
yeah, I don't confide in people super easily. And so, like, they didn't know it. Like, even my best friend back in Texas didn't really know these things that this stranger was telling to me. And I was like, this is absolutely insane. And so that she stops the reading and she said, they're telling me that this is going to be important for you. And she reached into her bag and it was a deck. It was Doreen Virtue's Angel Oracle. And she handed it to me and she was like, this was a gift to me from someone that I'm really close with, but they're telling me that this is really important and that you need to have this deck now. And I was like,
Wow.
okay, like,
What does
what do
that
I,
mean? Yeah.
yeah, what do I do with this, And so I was like, okay, so we finish up and later on that night, I was like, I don't really know how to use this thing. So I opened it and I kind of like read the introduction and I was like, you know what, maybe I'll just shuffle and I'll pull one card and I'll just see what that card is. And unfortunately, I don't remember what that card is anymore, but what I remember is as soon as I started shuffling, I felt the feeling that had been described to me at church my entire life, which is the burning in the bosom, the like the feeling that you're in touch with the Holy Ghost or the Holy
Something.
Spirit
Yeah, yeah.
or some the
Your
the powers
faith, if I
that
put it
be.
that way. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And I never felt that within Mormonism. And I always thought that because everybody around me felt it and I didn't, that there was something broken inside of me. It never occurred to me that I didn't feel it because that was not the right belief system for me. It might work wonderfully for other people. It doesn't work for me,
Yeah.
right? So I'm shuffling those cards and all of a sudden I'm feeling that feeling of connection to a power outside of yourself. And I don't know how to explain it because at this point, I still was like, I don't even know if there is anything, what is it? I don't know. My beliefs have changed so many times throughout the years, but it was that moment. And so I started pulling a card a day and writing down the card that I got and writing down what the guidebook said it meant. And then I bought a tarot deck and I bought a book. I used the Biddy Tarot's Guide to Tarot. Biddy Tarot. I don't remember what it's called, but it's Biddy Tarot's guide.
Yeah.
And it breaks down what every card means and it shows you different areas that it could apply to your life. And so I started pulling more cards for myself every day. And then I would write down what I thought it meant. And I would most often be working through some internal struggle because leaving Mormonism left me with a lot of religious trauma that I was kind of working out. I was trying to figure out who I was as a person. And then I had a reading one day. The deck was the Wildwood Tarot, and this one it kind of has a more Celtic influence. And in that guidebook is written slightly differently than others, but there was a reference towards soul loss in there. I don't remember exactly what else it said, but the reading altogether seemed to indicate that like the things that I had been through, the reason that I felt kind of empty inside is because I had experienced some level of soul loss. And I didn't know what that was. So once again, I skipped off to Google and I was like,
Yeah.
what is soul loss? Or whatever I Googled. And it introduced me to shadow work, which is basically what I was already doing without having a name for it, which was examining my personal wounds,
Yeah.
understanding what happened, why it hurt, and the behavioral changes that I developed because of that, and then working to kind of reclaim that piece. So I had a very long process of kind of like building myself back up and kind of stepping into my own identity as a woman outside of the Mormon faith. Um, this is when I started my Instagram page, which used to be titled The Village Tarot Witch. That was my username originally. And I would just share my card readings for the day. And I would share like, okay, well, this is coming up. Well, now I kind of want to explore this aspect. And that's what I would do on there.
Yeah.
And that part of my life was exciting and thrilling and completely magical because it's like the equivalent of, I mean, I was an adult with no belief system, having like torn down everything, dismantled my faith, dismantled my thought processes around my faith. And then all of a sudden, I was almost like the door to Narnia opened and I walked into it and it was like, there's so much connection
Yeah.
everywhere. There's so much that I can learn about myself. I can help other people learn about them. And it was like being in this fairy tale. But if this was a fairy tale, then if I was the heroine in this story, this is kind of the middle part of the book where shit starts to go wrong. Right?
Yeah.
Like we have the beginning part. The incentive was for me to leave the church, and then you start down your little hero's journey and you get built back up, but there's this underlying tension that something is about to come to a head. And for me, it was my marriage. I wouldn't change anything because my marriage, I have 3 children from that marriage. I wouldn't trade. I would take everything that happened to me twice over if it meant still being able to be their mom. So,
Yeah.
but having said that, I never should have married this person in the first place. We were not well matched, but we both were raised Mormon, so we were conditioned to believe that you had to
That's the word.
follow certain steps. And our marriage was never super healthy. Um, it was always easy to kind of explain it away or think that things would get better because he was in the military. So he would be gone for months at a time. And then he'd come back and things would start to get really bad. And then he'd leave again. And while he's gone, as other
Good.
military wives will explain this process, you're like, there's like that relief and like, it's kind of weird that I feel relieved right now.
Yeah.
And he's gone. And then he's gone long enough that you start to get stressed about doing everything yourself. And then he comes back and then there's the honeymoon period and then rinse and repeat. Okay. So looking at my life history, the way that I was conditioned to look at marriage and how as women we were taught to operate within that marriage, which is to be very submissive. There's a story, and this may have changed for full disclosure. I haven't been an active member of the church for like 10
Wow.
years now. It's been a long time. But there is a story that Joseph Smith, the founder of Mormonism, also introduced polygamy into Mormonism. And the way that believing members of the church are taught polygamy is to be shown that, well, he didn't really want to do this, but he had to. And then they would focus a lot on the pioneer phase, which happens after Joseph's death for the most part, where there are so many widows and orphan children that, well, they took on extra wives to help the women and children. And so it's framed in these different ways that nobody really wants to talk about the uncomfortable thing, which is that
Yeah.
Joseph Smith had an affair with a teenager who he then married to fix it, right?
Yeah.
And then he lied to his wife. He married multiple women without even telling her. And then you watch him basically berate her until she gives in. He says that an
Yeah.
angel with a flaming sword came and said that he would destroy us if I don't take another wife. And
Yeah. That's
by
wild.
this point, he's married to multiple women. Okay,
Yeah.
but we are all taught this story not as look at the lies and control and deceit. This is gaslighting. This is manipulation. This is
Yeah.
all the
It's like
tactics.
it's a gift and he was told to do
Yes.
it and he was put into
Yes.
place. Yes.
So
Yes.
these are all abuse tactics that we are told that story in a romantic, as Mormons, we're told that story in a romantic spin, how hard it was for both of them and how much they prayed. And his wife eventually, gives up, gives in. And when she does that, it is taught as this ultimate act of honoring her husband. So we are literally taught that your husband could be doing something awful, but if he is the man of the household, he is in communication with
He's
God,
allowed to. Yeah.
and your job as his wife is to just accept it. And so I was having all these moments where I'm like, he would get caught in these enormous lies. And it was just this constant thing. Before we moved to Florida, I remember saying, one more lie and I'm done. One more lie. Like, this is ridiculous. Why, you know, at this point, there's so many of them. And it seems like what happened the before the shit hit the fan, excuse my language, it seems like small potatoes in comparison. Um, but basically, my marriage fell apart. And as it was disintegrating, my ex-husband got more and more mean. So there was already the pattern of gaslighting and manipulation and coercive control that I was experiencing in that marriage. But I feel like I had to be built up enough post Mormonism where I could look at it and be like, wow, this is
Yeah.
really an unhappy marriage. So by the time things started to get really bad, I was already looking for a way out. I was trying to figure out how I could earn enough of an income to leave and support myself and my kids. Um,
That's what I was about to
and
say because a lot of
Mhm.
women, oh, I wouldn't just say women, but I would say majority of what I think or have heard is that a lot of women would stay because of the circumstances they're in. You know, they don't
Mhm.
work, but then there's also like, I have to stay for my kids. And I think that's an older way of thinking, where I think
Yeah.
today's generation is more of, I would prefer to leave because that's
Yes.
better for my kids. Because now I am the person, if I stay, I'm creating a generational curse for my, for
Mhm.
example, daughter to marry somebody that's going to treat her like that, or my sons to think it's okay to treat their future wife like that. Whereas, like, if I leave this, I'm not saying you're a bad father, I'm not saying you're a bad husband, but we just don't work together. And so
Right.
maybe we could be a better example for our kids being separate.
Yep. Yeah. And that's so important to tell people that, like, hey, your kids seeing you happy and thriving is more important. I was not I couldn't afford to leave. And this is another thing that happens to a lot of women is they get stuck because um I went to cosmetology school, but I let my license expire when I was pregnant, and then my ex-husband was gone, and I kept thinking, "Oh, well, I'll renew it," but then I was staying home with the kids, and then I got pregnant again, and there just wasn't I had no work history. I had no formal training aside from cosmetology school. I couldn't get my license. I was living in a different state then, so I would have had to take more classes. Um, it seemed insurmountable, and like looking back I'm like, well, there obviously you have options, and I did, and it's not that I don't, but that I didn't, but when you're in that position it's so hard to see that, um because all you can see are the barriers. So I homeschool my kids. I still homeschool my kids. I've managed to make it work through all of this. One of them may go to public school next year. It's always it's always their decision. But a homeschooling mom of three, living alone at this, when I was trying to figure out how to make it work, he was living back in Texas and things were getting worse and worse. And I knew I was running out of time. And every time something bad happened, the mental stress added and added and added. And there's something that I've heard a lot in the mental health world that I really appreciate this analogy is that when you put enough pressure on a bone, it's going to break.
Break.
The
Yeah.
exact same thing will happen to your brain. So I had a background of religious trauma. I had a bad marriage. So I came to this situation with a lot, but I am fairly confident that what happened to me would break anyone. Like
Yeah.
it nobody can withstand that amount of stress. So
No, 100%.
I did not know. I can tell you the moment that I can almost pinpoint the exact moment when it went from just trauma to PTSD, but I didn't understand the physical toll that having a mental illness will take on you. I didn't understand, like, I thought I knew enough by that point that I reached out to, on Instagram, her handle is the Tarot Diagnosis, Shannon. She's a licensed psychotherapist. And since we are friends, I didn't ask her like for professional help, but I asked her for resources to, I was like, I'm pretty sure that this is what's happening to me, and I think that I need to talk to someone. And it did take me a little while to connect with someone. But what ended up happening is that I hit a point where I realized that my body was just like giving out from sheer stress, and that the situation with my ex-husband, I had been trying to like manage and de-escalate and just trying to figure out how to keep things from completely blowing up. But we had hit a point where I he crashed his car off of an overpass. He, I believe, was under some sort of substance. So I got a call early one morning that he was in the hospital. His bladder was ruptured. He broke his arm. He needed several surgeries.
But
It was a pretty major car crash.
yeah.
I spent the first few days after that waiting for him to be arrested. The story from other sources may have changed at this point to reflect him in a better light, and that's fine. But
Yeah.
um, state troopers went to his hospital room. Like, I thought that he was going to be arrested, and how was I going to take care of the kids?
Mm.
Um, so, you know, after that had happened, um, we were separated before that. He called me and he was like, I just don't know what's wrong with me. I don't know why I keep saying the things that I'm saying. I don't know why I'm doing the things that I'm doing. I can't show up to work. I can't wake up. And so I spent months calling every single day to make sure he was getting up, making sure he was going to work,
Yeah.
even after the,
Everything.
even after everything, even after everything. And then, um, he had called one day, or I called him. He was like, "Oh, I'm already in the car. I'm leaving." He said he was leaving his brother's house. He's going to work, blah, blah, blah. He had turned down his location services, and on my iPad, it shows, or it showed at the time, my iPad quickly became my youngest daughter's iPad. So, like, if she is getting on it, it just pops up. And it popped up that day, and I saw that he was in a completely different city. And I was like, hey, I took a picture. I was like, you
Yeah.
literally just told me that you were
Right,
driving
your
to work.
brothers. Yeah.
And yeah, and he was like, well, I know how anxious you get about XYZ. I think he said about money. I know how anxious you get about money. And so I didn't want to tell you because I didn't want you to flip out. So again, a classic abusive technique,
Yeah.
making it
Your
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 fault.
fault. Yeah.
Um, So he was in a completely different city applying for a new job, and but like with everything that was like things weren't improving. I was never planning on staying in that marriage. I just was trying to make it to like a point where I felt like there was enough stability that I could leave. But after that happened, I kind of hit a point where I realized that if I stayed, I like there something else was going to happen that we would not bounce back from, and it would be me and the kids who were struggling, right? I
Yeah.
mean, we already had been struggling at that point because like
Yeah.
it's financial control, financial abuse, all of that was at play. So I called my dad, and he had been trying to get me to move in with them for a while, because when things started to get bad, I had been letting my family know, like, I don't know what to do here. And he'd been trying and trying, and I kept saying, no, like, I like my life here. I want to keep my life here, which remains true. I really wanted to stay in my house. I wanted to stay in Florida. But I could see the writing on the wall. So my dad pretty much immediately got ready to get in a U-Haul. He drove from Texas to Florida. He picked me and the kids up. We packed basically just our clothes and a few of the decorations that I really wanted. I left all of my furniture. I left all of my ex-husband's stuff in our garage for him. I arranged for somebody to like temporarily rent the house. So I took basically bare minimum when I left, and then I moved in with my parents. I still live with them, so that aspect is a little bit challenging because my life is so strange. But
It's new. It's a start over. And
it's a start
like
over.
get people that
Yeah.
say, well, you're silly. Why didn't you leave? Why didn't you this? And you had all this time. But, unless you're in the situation or you've, I don't even want to say if you know somebody that's gone through the situation, I think you need to experience to be that person that says, sometimes you just feel helpless and you feel weak. Like you do
Yep.
feel weak because emotionally and mentally you have been abused in a way to learn I am
Yep.
nothing without you. And I relate
Exactly.
so much with that because I mean I wasn't married to my past relationships and I was working. So we have
Hmm.
so much differences, but we still kind of would have ended up in the same place. I was working, I
Yep.
had my own money, but my relationship was toxic. And I think at the time, because of upbringing and how society makes you think when you're with somebody for so long, like now to just up and leave, it's embarrassing and why you're leaving. And
Hmm.
now you have to talk and explain to people why you're leaving. And so out of like a 6-year relationship, the last 3 years, like I stayed and I was unhappy,
Hmm.
but I was comfortable.
Yep.
And so I'm deteriorating as a person because in my mind, I'm like, okay, but we have this house that we paid together. And so if now I'm alone, how do I pay it by myself?
How
How
do
do
I
I do
pay it?
this? How do I,
Hmm.
and it took him losing his job and me having to actually pay for the things by myself for me to actually realize, well,
I don't
actually,
need you.
I've been doing it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But like it sometimes for some women it doesn't happen that easily. It doesn't happen that
Yeah.
something happens for them to realize. And I think like a lot of why I'm pushing for my business coaching to be directed at, moms and single women and just women entrepreneurs is because I started a business at 23, just doing
Hmm.
something on the side. I was working full time, but because I was doing that, I could afford to live by myself and I could afford to get a new car and I could do these things. And so I just think that there are so many women that are so talented or want to do something that in their life, it might not be from a bad relationship. It could have been just upbringing or financial head start that they don't have, that they sit there and they say, well, I can't do it. And
Yep.
they put their whole life on hold because they think more of the future.
Hmm.
And it's like, yeah, but you're wasting the present time. If you keep
Yep.
thinking, well, if I do it in 5 years' time, then I will be earning this and this and this much. But like you're wasting right now. Even if you
Yeah.
start and you fail, I don't, I always say to people that say to me, well, well, you've done like 5 different things before you got to where you are now. And how do you feel after failing? And I'm like, I never said I failed. You see it as a
Mm-hmm.
failure because I said I opened this and then I closed it. But
Mm-hmm.
all of those failures led me to the right direction. I
Yep.
don't see it as, oh, I failed. I think that things don't work out specifically because it's a redirection. So instead
Mm-hmm.
of just closing something out and saying, well, oh, that's it, I throw in the towel, it's a redirection to sit there and say, well, where did I go wrong? Did I go
Yes.
wrong with
Yes.
myself, with my thinking, or physically, like the path of, the business or the path of this relationship? Like, where did it go wrong and how can I redirect? How can I make it better? How can I become stronger out of
Yes.
the process? um
I love that. And actually, so I'm in school for hypnotherapy right now. I'm about to start my internship, but that process that you're talking about earlier when you were saying that there's always like a reason why you should stay, even with you, where you were like, I'm really unhappy. I should leave. Oh, but what about XYZ? It's because your brain is programmed to want to resist change no matter what, even if it's a good kind of change. Like leaving a bad relationship, you know why you should be leaving. But when your conscious mind makes that decision, it's only a small fraction of your total mind power. The rest of your mind is busy thinking of all the reasons why that change is scary and actually bad for you. So when you're meeting resistance like that, like when you're trying to leave a relationship and thinking, oh, well, how am I going to pay the bills by myself? Sometimes you actually have to see it in front of you, like you
yeah,
did, where you're like, oh, well, I'm
yeah,
already doing
doing
this.
it
So
exactly.
what are you doing for me?
Yeah,
Get out, you know? But if you don't have those experiences to show you that you already, those are things that your brain knows and understands, it'll keep trying to keep you in the exact same spot, even if you're unhappy, even if you're being abused. So it's like conditioning that you've received from your abuser or from life or from whatever is happening. And then your brain's natural processes both working against you before you can finally
yeah,
work through that and make that next step. And actually, what you did with reframing it was brilliant too, because so many people, both as a professional tarot reader and as a hypnotherapist in training, come with these things. Even I can say that, oh, well, I did this, I did that. I have adapted for a long time in saying, well, if I hadn't done this, then I never would have done this, which led me here, kind of like what you are saying. But there's a lot of people that lack that understanding that just because one thing didn't work out, it doesn't make you a failure. And so they're holding those feelings, that grief of failure
yes,
over the head, the shame of feeling. And then when they try to start something new, their brains kick in with, well, you're never going to be able to succeed because look at all of these failures that you're
yeah,
dealing with here. You couldn't follow through on this project. What makes you think you can follow through on this
on another
project?
one. Yeah,
Which is your brain trying to help you. It thinks it's preventing you from more pain, but all it's really doing is keeping you stuck.
yeah, no, 100%. And I like that you said that because so my whole life, I even have it tattooed on me. I have this tattoo that says basically like mind over matter. And my whole life, I went through understanding that you can train your brain what to feel. You can train
Hmm.
your brain to tell your body what to feel. And so I think like the beginning stages of that saying kind of made me believe like, okay, something happens, the way I think about it, I can get over it. But
Hmm.
as I've gone through certain things in my life, there is a fine line between your mind can be very deceiving.
Hmm.
And a lot of people say, well, you got to go with your heart more than your mind. And I now believe that more than your mind because our mind is so succumbed with information from TV and watching movies and fairy tales and what people give us, in conversations as advice. And like a lot of me now, I say when people come to me for advice, I always say, please, I'm not giving you advice because one, my advice is going to be based on if I were going through the situation.
Mm-hmm.
If I've
Mm-hmm.
never gone through the situation, I actually have no right sitting there saying, you've got to leave this guy, you've got to, sell this broken car, you've got to do this and, pack your bag and leave the country. But I've never been in the situation. But then there's
Right.
the situation of I can be giving you advice based on I have been in the situation. But again,
Mm-hmm.
everybody's mind and journey, I'm sorry, heart and journey is different. So how I feel with my soul to something could be different the way that you're attached to it. So now you
Yes.
take my advice and you break up with this guy, and 2 years later you resent me because I told you to break up with this guy. And maybe your journey was different in terms of actually, if you and this guy went to therapy and he did his inner work and you did your inner work and it could have worked out, and
Mm-hmm.
now you're seeing him with somebody else. I think that a lot of people have this mindset of, I have my mind made up. But then they
Right.
sit there and they are hurting. Physically, their soul is hurting because they either have this, karmic attachment or twin flame attachment or soulmate attachment. And it's like, again, it comes back to if you're not knowledgeable with your own self, you are slowly going up in flames. And I always say
Yes.
to people, like, you need to take your mental health so seriously. And if you feel like your body is constantly telling you something and your mind is saying, stop thinking about it, stop this, stop that, like everything is so energetically connected that if you're
Mm-hmm.
constantly like drawn to something, where it's a job, where it's a person, where it's a I don't want to eat this type of food. Like you have to listen to it. You can't just have your
Yes.
mind keep saying no, 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 because your mind is like this, your brain is this muscle that's taken all this information and it's like, yeah, but in reality, this doesn't work like this. And in reality,
Mm-hmm.
fairy tales don't happen. But if your body is physically rejecting somebody and your mind is saying, I can change them, I can change them, your body is trying
Yep.
to tell you something. You've got to, and
Your
that's what I was
body
saying in
is
the
telling
beginning of the
you.
conversation. Like you have to listen to your body because sometimes you stay in these relationships or you stay in these workplaces and then you just physically become ill. Like you lose
Yes.
weight or you gain weight or you just like constantly sick all the time and you keep blaming everything else in the world and in the meantime it's actually what's happening right in front of you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm actually glad that you brought up the twin flames ideology and things like that, because as beautiful as that sentiment is, whether or not you believe in it, that there's a perfect half for everyone, that same idea is used to explain toxic relationships that, honey, no, it's not
Yeah,
a,
because
a
maybe you're
loving,
supposed to meet each other to actually teach each other about it's yourself,
yes,
like what is
yes.
missing,
You
and be
may
better
learn
for
a
somebody
lesson.
else. Exactly.
Exactly. You may learn a lesson, but believing that somebody is your twin flame doesn't excuse
Behavior.
abuse or explosive arguments or the push and pull. None of that is a long-term healthy relationship. So stop thinking about people in terms of, well, it's okay that he blew up at me and didn't talk to me for 2 months because he's my twin flame. It's
Yeah.
not okay. It's not okay.
Might be
And
a comic, like
yes, it's more damaging to continue to say, oh, well, and not saying that everybody who uses those terminology does. I don't mean that at all. I just mean that I have seen that tendency between
as
people
an
having
excuse.
as an excuse or conversations online about like, oh, well, I really like this person hurt me so badly, but it's my twin flame, so I have to forgive them, right? And no, no, you don't. You can actually move
Yeah.
on, but that goes back to your brain too. Like when you were saying, listen to your body and not your brain. Your brain, think of it like it's running an outdated computer programming, or when they update the algorithm on social media and you're like, why is nothing quite like working the same? I'm doing
Yeah.
the same things, but
Yeah.
like something is wrong here. It's because your mind is operating on
Thank
outdated software. It
Yeah.
needs a reboot. You need new beliefs, new associations, because Your brain is programmed to take everything that you are thinking and feeling in the present moment. You have a filter in your brain. It's called the well, I could give you the whole spiel, but it's called your critical mind. And it's like a little like a coffee filter placed above your subconscious. And so when your thoughts, your new memories, your new experiences are being poured in, it will filter out everything that does not fit with your subconscious programming. So when your body is like, this is a bad situation, and your brain is like, you know what? I don't know if this is a healthy relationship, but you have been conditioned with thoughts like, how am I going to survive without this person? It's my twin flame. Whatever it is that you're thinking, your brain will reject the thought that you want to leave because it is still operating under the software programming saying that you want to be with this person. So,
Yes.
like to
Yes.
bring it back to your example again, when you realized that you were afraid that you weren't be able to pay your bills by yourself, and then you realized that you already were. That was your brain naturally having,
Reprogramming.
yes, naturally
Yeah.
having that breakthrough. But if you are stuck in that process, what excites me so much about what I'm doing now is that I have taken the work that I've done with tarot and shadow work and finding out the whys. Like, why do you feel stuck? Why are you repeating this same pattern where you meet someone who has the same negative traits as your last boyfriend, and then you break up and you go back and you do it all again? Why is that pattern happening? What lesson do you need to learn? Right. So that's my background with tarot, where I find the why. I investigate, I dig in, and I can normally help my clients figure out when this pattern started, why, and why they're reacting the way that they do. And then with hypnosis, we can go in and really easily and effortlessly
Understand why.
update your programming. So
Yeah.
hypnosis, they call it like the bypassing. And the thing about what I do with both tarot and hypnosis is that there's a lot of what's the word I'm looking for? Stigma for both of those, right? You think tarot and you think like the carnival woman with the
Yeah,
scarves on her
yeah, yeah.
head. Or like the back alley with the
The
neon
gypsy
lights.
dress. Oh,
Yes.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, telling you like handing you the death card and saying you're gonna die. None of that is how most tarot
The
readers
person
operate.
version of Google when you Google your symptoms, basically.
Yes. Yes, exactly. Where it's like, oh, guess what? You're gonna die. Misfortune's gonna befall you. Like that's not how most tarot readers read tarot. When you think about hypnosis, you normally, I know that I used to think of stage hypnosis where they snap their fingers, everybody falls
Do
down,
something.
or they make
Yeah.
you quack, or they make you jump up and do these things that you would never do, which implies mind control. And the scary thing, I was resistant to hypnosis for a long time. I had to have somebody explain it to me in just the right way before I was like, oh, I
Yeah.
was wrong. Like, I was way off here. Um,
Is it
when
true that hypnosis is more for triggering what the brain suppresses, like those traumatic things that actually build up who we are?
No.
And it's kind of like hidden. Okay, so that's
So,
my understanding of it. So that's why I'm scared. I'm
well,
always like, I don't want to bring up remembering something and then I
right,
change who I am because of remembering it.
right, exactly. So, hypnosis is a state of narrowed focus. So, you go in and out of hypnosis all day, every day. Like that first 30 minutes when you first wake up in the morning and you're like halfway dreaming, halfway alert, or right before you go to bed at night, or if you are reading a book and fully sucked into the storyline and somebody taps your shoulder and you're like, ah, like,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
you forget where you are, or watching a movie, or even if you're driving in the car. Have you ever been driving and then,
Basically like zoning out and you're like,
yes,
come back. Okay.
yes. So that those are all natural forms of hypnosis. Even feeling a strong feeling can be a form of hypnosis. And when one of the things that I was afraid of before I learned what it actually was is that I would actually go to sleep and that other people would have free reign in my brain. Ask any trauma survivor anywhere, and every single one of us is going to be like, excuse the fuck out of me. No, like,
Yeah, not
why,
happening.
why would I let you have that level of control over me? Like, that's no, thank you. You're not actually asleep if you go to a hypnotherapist, you don't actually go to sleep. What they do is they get you to a deeply relaxed state. It's like if you've ever done any of the guided meditations on YouTube, it's very similar language, it's very similar wording, but it's a little bit deeper. So it feels like you're awake, you're having thoughts, you can still hear sounds around you. You are in complete control the entire time. You're just allowing yourself to relax. So your hypnotherapist, like if we were, let's keep using the analogy of someone knowing that they need to leave a relationship and why, just like you were saying before, you wouldn't go in and be like, you have to break up with your boyfriend in a hypnotherapy session. It would be more like suggesting positive changes to help build up your self-worth so you can see that
Yeah.
you are already whole and valuable and you don't need to be, you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
You don't need somebody to validate you to be
Yes,
you, basically.
exactly. So you work on instilling those positive changes that we're looking for a little bit easier instead of having to go through what you did, which is the stress and being like, how am I going to afford this? It's that moment that you had, that moment of clarity of, oh, I already am, but in a state of hypnosis. So you kind of like bypass some of the processing time of being like, you know what? Maybe this is an unhealthy relationship. If I had a client in front of me, I would sit down with them and all my sessions start with cards and I'd say, well, tell me a little bit about what's been going on for you, what's been coming up. And if you're telling me about it and you're saying, I'm really unhappy, but I just feel like I can't leave, I'd say, okay, well, let's take a moment with the cards and let's see if we can figure out why. Like, what
Mm,
story is your subconscious mind telling you
telling you.
why you can't leave? Right. And so then let's say the story is, um, well, we'll stick with finances because that's my story and your story. They're afraid that they can't make it financially. Okay, well, what feelings are
Attached
associated
to
with
it.
that? For me, it was self-worth. For you, it may have been something different, but for me, my worth was directly tied to my ability to make an income. And I didn't have that ability, and so I was automatically just assuming that I couldn't do it right off the bat. Before I had even taken the first step, I took the step with the belief that I couldn't do it. So did I do it? No.
Yeah.
I've been fighting against myself I fought against myself for the long
A
time
long
because
time.
I didn't have the built-in belief. So if that was me, if that was my client, I would sit down with that client and if the answer ended up being I don't think I have to prove my worth by my income. I'd say, okay, well, where have you felt worthy in other areas of your life? And we'd start to draw connections. If they don't know the answer, which happens a lot,
Yeah.
especially with trauma survivors, it happens to me still constantly. If someone's like, "When's the last time you feel proud of yourself?" My brain will empty faster than anything, and I'm
Yeah.
like,
And then
I
10
have
hours
things.
later, when you're in the shower, it's like,
Yeah,
oh, I should have said this
you're like,
and this and
oh,
this.
that was the thing. I'm proud
Yeah.
of myself because of this. But sometimes on the spot like that, your brain will go blank. But that's why I like to incorporate the cards because in those moments where trauma or conditioning or just being put on the spot means that you can't think of a single thing that makes you worthy, I can go in with my cards and I can pull a few cards and I can say, well, here's a reason why you're worthy. What are you thinking about that? And talking about it. And then when we go into the hypnosis session, would I be saying a single thing about you need to break up with him? You need to do this? No, we would work on building up the feeling of self-worth. And it might take a few sessions. Most of these aren't like automatic fixes, but this can
Yeah.
be applied to anything in your life. If you want to quit smoking, if you want to lose weight, but you can't stop binge eating, Um, if what are other examples? They always bring in smoking and alcohol, but like if you're having a hard time studying and you want to create new, healthier study habits, things like that, all of those can be worked on with hypnosis. But much like anything, you take the first step and you have to keep working on it
Yeah.
before it. And the other important thing that we always say is that hypnotherapy is a partnership. I'm not doing the work for you. I'm guiding you.
Guiding
I'm
you.
I'm guiding you with the cards, and then I'm helping to guide your brain, but you are the one that actually does the work. It's not me going in and rewiring your brain. It's you
The
and your
willingness.
brain. It's your willingness, it's you and your brain saying, "You know what? This feels true to me," and then building habits that support the new known association to get to the point where you are ready to make that change, whatever it is.
Yeah, no, I got goosebumps because, like, again, it takes me back to honestly what I believe is that your awake state mind is your biggest enemy because
It is.
you could be, I always say I listen to my dreams and I will wake up and when I
Hmm.
remember them, I research, I Google, okay, there was a tiger in my dream. What the freaking hell does a tiger mean? And for some reason, it's always going back to what I am feeling like
Hmm.
lately or what I'm going through. Like this is one dream that I'll always do. I think it's the teeth falling out, and I'll always be,
Oh,
it's like,
yeah.
oh, you're worried about like finances or you're having money issues. And it's like, oh shit, like
Yep.
in this moment I am. And again, because our awake state mind pushes back what our subconscious is like picking up throughout the day that
Hmm.
we're actually not focusing on. And so when
Yes.
your body is at ease and your mind is actually switched off and you're dreaming, I feel like that's your inner self trying to communicate with you and say, hey, you're suppressing this.
Hmm.
Let's go back to
Hmm.
it. Like when you wake up, like I'm here, deal with it because this is going to make you not feel so anxious until payday, or it's not going to make you feel
Yes.
like so emotional because somebody's left you on red. And so I think that again, it's so amazing to when you get to the point of actually understanding yourself and understanding emotions and just being in such a good mental health space. It's sad to see that a lot of people lack this. And like it
Hmm.
always goes back to obviously like me losing my best friend and all the stresses that he had in life that led to his final decisions. It's so me now, like even when I have a daughter. If my daughter ever
Hmm.
has to come home one day and she's upset because a boy never gave her closure, like that really affects me because I'm like, this mentally and emotionally unstable person
Hmm.
feels entitled to make somebody else overthink and sit
Hmm.
there and blame themselves where you don't know that your decision can affect somebody's entire life, like the entire path. And so for me, like I go through things. I've been hurt and I last year was a shitty year. And a lot of people, when I open up to them and, again, like I don't personally open up with things, but I will open up in terms of how I deal with emotions. And people
Hmm.
will be like, shit, you've gone through a lot in your life. Like those are things that hurt.
Yep.
They'll be like, but like you don't seem unhappy. Like your energy is like you're constantly still want to help people. And I'm like, I never ever said I'm unhappy. Like I've had things that hurt me until today it still hurts me. But
Hmm.
I'm not unhappy because I'm hurting. Because I'm
Yes.
mentally and emotionally in a good place. Mentally, I'm in such a good place that nothing can affect me. Because
Right.
again, I don't allow anybody to define my happiness.
Hmm.
Before, yes, I did. I was like, I'm crying and I'm unhappy, and is it me? But at the end of the day, it's like you just get to a point where when you've done your inner work and you know how strong you are as a person, it does allow you to sit back. And it's sad because I say as an empath, it hurts more when you're trying to like help somebody else understand that they are honestly being the way that they are or treating somebody else the way that they are because they actually have so much unhealed trauma
Mm-hmm.
from being a kid or something that has happened that has blocked them from understanding that how I'm treating this person is because I'm actually not healed with myself. And so I always say to people, like, yeah, I heard like there's moments where it always creeps up on you. But I've also learned that you don't need to grieve in silence. Like grieve out loud. Like if I'm the type of person like I never cry, but I will cry
Mm-hmm.
in the shower and I'll have moments. But then there's times where it's just like if I am out in the mall and I'm just being emotional, I need to be emotional. Because again, like so
Right.
many people, even for men, a lot of men are brought up in a society where it's like, you don't show emotion. You're not supposed
Right.
to cry. You're not supposed to feel weak. You're not supposed to feel hurt. And it's like, that's not okay. Like, you have to. You grieve when people die, and you grieve when you lose something, and you grieve when you lose a job. And like, you have to allow yourself to feel that. And if people around you don't accept it, it's okay. But I mean, hurting in your life doesn't mean that you're necessarily unhappy. It just means that it's something you have to work through and it's always going to creep up. So, yeah.
I love how you phrase that. And it's actually a really beautiful explanation of what the purpose is behind shadow work, because what you're describing is allowing yourself to freely feel what you need to feel without judgment, right? That is the way that humans are meant to exist. But we have put emotions in black and white, good or bad categories. So many people are trying to force themselves to feel happy and not dealing with the sadness until it comes to a breaking point. But then they're like, well, I shouldn't feel this way because I have this, that, or the other in my life. And the fact of the matter is, all emotions are meant to be felt. Good ones, bad ones. We're not supposed to be happy all the time, just like we're not supposed to be sad all the time. If emotion is a spectrum, or if you think about the sun rising, the shadows are going to be in different spots depending on the day. None of them are inherently bad things, but in allowing yourself to connect with your emotions and let them flow through you, you avoid getting the blockages where you then have to go in with somebody like me and is like, what the fuck? Why can't I get past this thing? And
Yeah.
it usually the answer is because for whatever reason, you felt like you were not able or allowed to feel those feelings. So they got repressed, they got shoved aside until they manifest as these patterns that we want to break. But the fact of the matter is, you're supposed to feel. You're supposed to feel
Exactly.
good and bad
Yeah.
all of the time. It's not
Yeah.
all, you're not always going to be happy. You're not always going to be sad. Sometimes there might be an imbalance, but you're going to have highs and lows no matter what. You can still
Yeah.
choose to be having a rough time and take a moment to have fun with your friends. Does it mean that you're not having a hard time? No. It means that
Yeah.
in that present moment, you're enjoying yourself. And
Yeah.
that's a good thing.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I think like obviously when people go through something traumatic or, where it's loss, where it's a breakup, where it's financial, like there are moments where we don't want to get out of bed. And it's like I have to
Mhm.
be in this feeling because right now my whole world has come down. And it's like
Yes.
it's okay to still continue. And when you come home
Hmm.
and if you want to feel like that okay, again, that's okay to feel like that, but you can't just say no to everything else and then you slowly deteriorate because it's like I just got cheated on so I shouldn't leave my house because
Hmm.
again that's your awake mind telling you like it's because you don't look good so don't go and put on makeup and look pretty and
Right.
don't go out and sit in front of people because it's embarrassing you're gonna have to tell your story it's like what we are telling ourselves when we're awake and it's affecting
The stories we tell
living.
ourselves.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
In the tarot world, we call those moments tower moments because there's a card in the tarot deck. It's called the tower that represents sudden upheaval and destruction. And
Mm,
generally speaking, the tower card it comes around these big life changes, like a breakup where you're feeling the grief. But the
Yeah.
point of the Tower card isn't to be like, wow, that sucks for you. The point of the Tower card is to acknowledge the destruction that has taken place, but also the secondary aspect of the Tower that is important to remember is that, is it painful? It might be surprising. You might have not seen it coming. All of that is true. But what's also true is that when that structure that was built is taken down and you've removed the rubble, you've gone through the healing process, you've cleaned up the site again, you get to choose what you build in its place.
Yeah.
Was it painful? Yes, it absolutely was. I am not here to dismiss anybody's pain for whatever experience that they have lived, but there's also a bright side to the Tower, which is that in the aftermath, as painful as it is, you get to decide what you want to grow there. And that's the thing that's been really challenging for me. The Tower card actually was like, there was a time not even that long ago, we're talking like within the last few months, that just pulling the Tower card would send me almost into an entire panic attack
Mm.
because I had
It's
every
like,
time.
oh, okay, I've got to go through this shit again.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Everything that I have gone through in the last few years, it was unfortunate to draw the Tower card as many times as I did. But at some point in the way, it got twisted in my mind, like the stories that we're telling ourselves. And I started to associate the Tower card with fresh trauma. And so I would pull the
Yeah.
Tower card and be like, oh God,
I
like,
was
I
about
can't
to
do
say,
anything
I
else.
don't think I know anybody that has gone through something so bad or shit in their life that like a few months later, a few weeks later, or years later is not sitting and saying, I'm so glad that I went through that because
Yeah.
I came out different. And
Yep.
like I mean I don't do tarot, but you're just talking about this tower card, and I think like my brain is now wired that I have the saying where I say to people, I'm like, well, bad things happen in three.
Hmm.
And like, okay, you're saying like you got a flat and you got this. There's one more thing. One
Yep.
more thing,
Yep.
and then it's just gonna be good. And like, I don't know if it's placebo effect, but that's worked for me where I'm like, okay, shit, somebody's
Bad
passed
things come in
away,
three.
this
Yep.
and this, and then it's like, okay, the good is coming. Like
Yep.
I just want to see the positive behind it because again, I'm like, if I keep hopping on bad, 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 the universe is gonna be like, okay, well, you want more bad? Here we go, here we go. But you're looking at it as like, okay, after the bad comes good. After the rain comes the rainbow. After
Yes.
the storm comes sunshine.
Exactly. It's
It's
that
like
same line of thinking that there is
literally,
the destruction from the tower, but afterwards
yeah.
things get good again. So sometimes it's uncomfortable in the aftermath. And if you or anybody listening, on my Substack, I have a blog post about the tower card. It kind of talks about the tower's meaning and we go a little bit deeper. But I attached a guided meditation to that to kind of sit with that energy of destruction, sift through the rubble, and start to pick what you want to plant moving forward. So in the same way where you want to, you know what, bad things come in three, one, two, three. That means good things coming. It's
Yeah.
very similar concepts in this meditation, except it's just using the tower card as imagery.
I love that. Well, I honestly, Carly, I can keep you here all day because I'm just like, are you like my mind?
Well, anytime you want to have a chat, let me know.
Yeah.
And yeah, anybody who's listening, I really do respond to every single message that I get in my inbox. Occasionally, I don't see it right away, but as soon as I see it, I respond.
All
So
right. And they can find you on Instagram.
I'm on Instagram as Karly.Latham. I am on TikTok under the same name. You can also search for Spellbound Healing on either one of those. Hopefully, I come up, but my name is the best one, and Substack as well. Um, my Substack, everything on there is free. And usually, whatever I'm talking about on my Instagram page or my TikTok, they're all the same theme. So I
Okay.
was most recently talking about perfectionism. So there's an audio blog on the Substack about my own struggles with perfectionism and what I kind of learned from them. I did a shadow work session for myself where I pulled my own cards and kind of talked everyone through what it was, what it meant for me, and then I followed that up with a at-home hypnosis session for perfectionism for free, for just to kind of give some helpful resources to people who need it but maybe can't afford to pay for a session. So
Well, I love that. I always say, like I started this podcast. I'm the type of person I hate sending voice notes. I hate hearing my own voice. But I just feel like sometimes like podcasts, books, anything that's, inspiring, um, it's for people that are going through the same thing or feel like I'm alone and it's embarrassing to talk about. So we're the ones that's hopping on here and talking about it so that people can sit back and say, oh, okay, I'm resonating.
yes.
That sounds like me. So that way, you can get the help and advice that we're here openly, willingly to talk about. So if anybody is, just feeling inspired and like pulled towards Karly, please reach out to her. I would love that.